You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
CYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have quite a bit of news, some breaking updates out of the Middle East as well. A new Reuters report suggesting that the United States is halting weapons shipments to some European countries, those a little bit closer to the Ruskies, and that whole shebang we're going to talk about regarding the now in place ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, well, Israel and Hezbollah, really. But before we get to that, new information: the Department of Justice is criminally investigating former California gubernatorial candidate and Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell. So this comes on the heels of a Congressional Ethics Committee investigation that, as soon as they kind of got into the full swing of things, he had already dropped out of the gubernatorial race because his poll numbers started sinking like concrete shoes outside of Chicago. We're talking, they were plummeting fast after allegation became allegations, became not just, hey, he touched me, to he forced kissing me, to he raped me, and then other girls and young women coming forward and announcing that he had date raped them, that basically maybe he'd pulled a little kind of a Bill Cosby roofie situation. And as these continued to mount, he went from saying all these allegations are false and I'm going to fight them, to I'm dropping out of the gubernatorial race, but I'm sticking around in Congress, to I am now resigning from Congress. And resigning from Congress was a little bit of a weird move. According to a roll call article, members of Congress are growing increasingly frustrated with the slow pace of the House Ethics Committee. Essentially, after the House Ethics Committee announces, hey, we think you have done bad stuff. Maybe you're Sheila Syphilis McCormick, and you are in Florida defrauding FEMA to fund your campaign. Maybe you are a Representative LaMonica McIver. You're body slamming federal law enforcement on camera up in New Jersey. Maybe you are a particular member of Congress who, after Epstein was already found for all of the horrible pedophilic stuff, you were taking direct orders from him while questioning the Trump administration, again, as a Democrat in the House a couple of years ago. Either way, when the House launches an ethics committee investigation, that thing drags its heels. And there's a tried and true method. If you are in the middle of a House Ethics Committee investigation in which it turns out you are doing lots and lots and lots of bad things, you just resign from Congress. So, for example, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, after it has basically followed or pushed through some information that Matt Gaetz had solicited sex from a 17-year-old girl who was attempting to get braces and was possibly going to have sex with Matt Gaetz in exchange for money for those braces as a young homeless woman. Well, the House Ethics Committee started unearthing more awkward and unfriendly things, and so we dropped out. After that, maybe I'll just finish out, the whole congressional run after I got pushed to the side over the Attorney General snub. Now we have Eric Swalwell here, and then, of course, Tony Gonzalez in Texas. So, of course, the ethics investigation into Representative Tony Gonzalez down in Texas, he had had an affair with a young lady who had later gone on to commit suicide. Never something that looks good. The ethics investigation started to unearth shadier and shadier things. And after losing his primary to the AK guy, even after, an original Trump endorsement that was later rescinded had come through for Gonzalez, he said, no, I'm out. The ethics committee investigation is getting a little too close for comfort here. I resign. Eric Swalwell has now done the same thing. And the House Ethics Committee is now pushing forward an idea that they need to streamline reviews, and delays undermine the accountability and public trust. And even though committee leaders are defending the process, I'm going to jump right here to the analysis before we get into the DOJ criminal investigation of Eric Swalwell, and say the real answer here is that House Ethics Committee investigations need to have teeth after the person has resigned from Congress. There need to be teeth. There need to be some kind of purse strings here that tie the congressional committee investigation into some kind of streamlined Department of Justice investigation. Because as long as this is just the community, kind of gathering around and agreeing over a nice steaming mug of Joe that they're a really bad, stinky person, and it can be shut down as soon as the person says, "Oh, I'm resigning." Strange stuff. Looks like the stream might be coming back up. Sorry about that, guys. Not sure what caused that. Regarding Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General, focusing on specifically civil rights issues, might also be playing a bit of a role in here, probably not from a civil rights perspective. But again, some of the kind of bizarre stuff in Swalwell and a lot of other DC affiliated personalities being involved in these rather criminal cases and these allegations, Harmeet's getting more involved. Because not only is the Department of Justice putting a heavy emphasis focusing on fraud investigation right now, but also into a lot of these congressmen who are perhaps committing a series of very, very gross crimes. And then as soon as the ethics committee starts to get a little too close for comfort, they peace out, see ya, and they go do something else entirely. Now, regarding the investigation from the Department of Justice, no longer are we seeing a series of look-ins to unethical relationships with staffers, but some of these date rape allegations that are being brought forward, women are starting to come forward by name, give additional evidence, give additional details. You're likely going to see the Department of Justice get some kind of grand jury indictment on Eric Swalwell here based on some type of sexual misconduct and perhaps an assault charge. Those are things that are on the table. And because of those felonies at the federal level, Swalwell could be looking at around, based on just the information that we have so far, if some of these things can be corroborated enough to get them in front of a jury and remove reasonable doubt, Swalwell could be looking at 10 to 15 years. And you say, well, I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. The Democrat establishment has already cut him completely loose, completely free. And one of the reasons that they have done so is because as we're finding out more and more and more about Ruben Gallego, who is now going on the record saying that this is an open rumor everyone was talking about. I was in the room talking about it. Everybody was talking about it, changing his story in 24 hours to, oh, I didn't know nothing. I mean, it was a rumor, but I thought he was just kind of flirty. Oh, these pictures start coming out of Swalwell and Gallego, who have always been kind of close. I mean, riding shirtless through the desert on camel and other various sorts of nonsense. Swalwell was a popular guy in the Democratic Party. And so for the Department of Justice to be carrying through this investigation right here and right now, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible to you. When you don't even see from kind of the larger media outlets in the announcement of, at least as Fox broke the story this afternoon, now CNN, Reuters as well, picking up the story that Swalwell is under criminal investigation from the Department of Justice. Eric Swalwell here does not appear, at least at the present time, to be floating any kind of, this is really political, I'm being targeted, this is some kind of a witch hunt thing, which, by the way, is what Eric Swalwell was saying a couple of months back. So on February 14th of this year, after the Department of Justice sent over a letter to Congress outlining a series of details regarding the Epstein files and redactions later on that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie would end up bypassing to dox innocent individuals who were, for example, the other people in a lineup, like look-alike people. They would dox from the floors of Congress later, right before Representative Ro Khanna would invite one of the groomers for Epstein as his State of the Union guest. Anyway, Eric Swalwell complained at the time, LOL, so one loser sends another loser a news article with my name in it, and the cover-up clan at the DOJ wants to put me in the same drawer as Donald Trump. Doesn't work that way. Trump is a friend of the pedos. I'm their worst nightmare. So one of the issues with all of these Epstein reports is that everyone and their brother was just named by random anonymous tip lines. So Swalwell comes forward and says, well, this is clearly the Trump administration trying to glue me to unsavory things. That was his take on it. And by following up and saying, well, actually, I'm the best friend to, you, me, and Dupree. Everybody loves me. I'm super duper woman defender. With a lot of these allegations getting worse and full of detail by the day, because a lot of the young ladies that Swalwell was allegedly molesting or raping after the event, after that night, are immediately telling all of their friends about it over text message the next day. This isn't a no one heard about it, no one had any idea, maybe Brett Kavanaugh laughed about beer in his yearbook. No. The next day, we have the records that are now starting to be voluntarily turned over by some of these women making the allegations, that show, yeah, they alleged it the day after. This wasn't something later on that was imagined months afterward. Radio crew, we're going to send you guys to the commercial break. We're going to continue here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, to be clear, as far as Department of Justice investigations are concerned, there are a couple of journalists that are now trying to rewrite history. We talked about this with Brian Stelter over at CNN, announcing that, realistically, CNN did all of the legwork here, even though it was a San Francisco Chronicle story reporting on a fairly open rumor over on the left that had been alluded to by outlets all the way over from the Federalist to yours truly over here at the Daily Signal. The last time that I had covered Fang and Eric Swalwell a couple of years ago, I had mentioned that there were some rumors that he had gotten too uncomfortable and frisky with women. I believe even in the context of Katie Porter being mean to her staff because they were both Californians that were considered rocky relationships at best with their staff members. But now, a young lady named Bethany Allen, over from formerly Axios, now she's with some Australian think tank, released a very bizarre thread today suggesting that actually it's the mainstream media, as in like the MSNBC, MS Now, and the CNN types, who are the only ones who have covered Eric Swalwell. All of the right-leaning and conservative outlets have not covered Eric Swalwell's sexual assault allegations. As one of the shows that broke this on Friday afternoon first, it came out Friday afternoon of last week. We were one of the very first shows to air it. It's hilarious watching the legacy media. They've been on top of it from day one. Here's what she alleges. Says Fox News has one of the biggest and best funded newsrooms in the U.S. Why didn't Fox News publish an investigation into Swalwell's sexual misconduct? Why didn't Breitbart or Newsmax or the Daily Caller? And why is no one on the right-wing media ecosystem asking questions? Guys, sometimes I can kind of follow the allegation that's being made from some of my counterparts over on the left side of the aisle. This is one I'm really, really in the dark over. And by the way, she leaves out outlets like, for example, the Daily Signal or the Daily Wire or townhall.com, Red State, various other right-wing outlets that absolutely have covered and referenced these particular things. And for that matter, just to make it clear, Fox News has absolutely covered these. Correspondents and reporters have referenced these types of rumors and allegations for years. Now, of course, she's being roasted over her argument that, quote, so-called mainstream media are the only outlets that have published major investigations into Swalwell, end quote. The current right-wing narrative, the mainstream media protected Swalwell because he's a Democrat, is the exact opposite question that they should be asking. Well, see, the funny thing is, during the Eric Swalwell Fang years, and then the farting on air and that being heard years, while the Democrats were not talking about that whatsoever, and the mainstream media outlets were not talking about that whatsoever, and especially weren't mentioning rumors of Swalwell's impropriety and perhaps date rapiness, there were many on the right-wing outlets that were. And how do I know? Because the links are currently being posted underneath all of these allegations. So that's one really bizarre side of, again, we'll be kind of looking through as the Department of Justice announces the end of their investigation. The key takeaway here, to kind of do a little Axios, the key takeaway, the Swalwell maneuver of resigning from Congress before they can investigate him fully, Americans are really tired of that. And at least right now, the Trump administration via Todd Blanche and Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, who, she'll investigate anything that doesn't smell quite right. That's what Americans are tired of. They understand that. This Department of Justice does get that Americans are tired of seeing, we've started an ethics committee and they've resigned. I don't believe coming forward here that we're going to see that happen, at least the ethics resignation escape route in the future. Republican or Democrat. And I'm not really broken up about that. I don't think you'd find Americans broken up about that either, at least so the early polling data shows. Now we have to bring the radio crew back in from the commercial break for some insane stuff out of Virginia today. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
There's a lot of messing around that is all over a series of cases, incidents, legal and judicial actions all over the country today. And one of the most outrageous and poisonous framings of a horrible situation today has been over the former Virginia Lieutenant Governor of the Ralph Northam administration, Democrat Justin Fairfax. So this was, again, the Lieutenant Governor, the second in command in Virginia, up until 2019, 2020. 2019 specifically. I mean, to see Justin Fairfax, who did a murder-suicide today, in which he shot his wife, 2018 to 2022. I knew that number wasn't quite. Again, just the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia a couple of years ago. This Justin Fairfax killed his wife and then shot himself. So allow me to give you kind of the summary from some of the major media outlets on this story today. Former Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax and his wife, Serena, died in an apparent murder-suicide at their home in Annandale early Thursday morning, April 16th, that being today. According to the Fairfax County Police, the 47-year-old former politician fatally shot his wife before turning the gun on himself following a domestic dispute related to their ongoing and messy divorce. The couple's 2 teenage children were inside the residence at the time. It's a horrible, horrible thing for children of any age to see. And their son made the 911 call shortly after midnight. Fairfax, kind of a rising star in the Democratic Party up until a couple of years ago, the current framing is now being rewritten to, well, there were a lot of sexual assault allegations that started to come out in 2019. These had been served with court papers regarding the divorce just before the incident. So there are a couple of things that were initially left out in some of the framing of this report today. And this is another open rumor situation in which things went very, very badly, very, very quickly. So allow me to break into some of the details here. So first and foremost, when the Fairfax County Police initially reported the incident, there was a question from one of the reporters on the ground. We don't have the video or the audio of this, at least right now, talking about the murder-suicide, and they were asked about whether or not there was suspicion this had anything to do with the sexual assault allegations from Fairfax back in 2019 forward. And the response from the police department was, we don't think so. Stupid thing to say. I highly, highly recommend against saying those kind of we lean this way or that way in an initial report. And again, right out the gate, like the local PBS NPR affiliate in Virginia, completely neglected to mention any of this individual, Justin Fairfax's history in the onset of the reporting. Now here, again, in the evening of the day after this horrific suicide murder, now we're starting to get some of the additional details. The reason that I placed this in the show, this is a choice by me specifically, regarding the Eric Swalwell allegations, there are so many open rumors on the left side of the aisle, and quite frankly, some on the right side of the aisle, regarding individuals who have these bizarre, every case of infidelity is bizarre, but these really twisted and sick allegations of sexual impropriety. And by the way, this is a really good time to point out that the Franklin and Billy Graham rule, what later coined kind of the Mike Pence rule, which is where hey, you're a married dude, you don't have dinner alone with ladies, you don't hire young ladies on your staff and are alone with them all the time. You kind of keep a lot of women at arm's distance because in a public position, one allegation of sexual assault can ruin your career. I'm just going to say that rule has remained supreme. And as a teacher, by the way, just as a quick side note here, I was obsessive over making sure that, first of all, I was never alone in the classroom with any girl student, specifically because of incidents like these. These kind of things where again, it's always one thing leads to another, or some allegation is made and there's some kind of a spiral. You never find yourselves in awkward, disturbing, or gross situations if you don't put yourselves in those kind of situations to begin with. Just to be clear, Call it being up on a high holy horse, whatever you want to call it. For me, I'm still seeing that particular kind of old Billy Graham rule. It's undefeated. Now, that aside, whether it is Eric Swalwell or whether in this case it is Justin Fairfax, there were a number of sexual assault allegations that came out about the individual. And back in 2019, originally, all of these Virginia Democrats and I remember this particular gubernatorial campaign, though I live in Indiana, because this is right around the time that I acted as a whistleblower against Indianapolis public schools regarding critical race theory. And I was following this election at the time between Terry McAuliffe and who would later then be, Glenn Youngkin. Because in the Fairfax situation, he was very vocal and praised, and a lot of these sexual assault allegations were kind of swept under the rug. And there was minimal coverage, and we don't really know all of the details, all these double standards regarding the Me Too movement stuff. And after he fell from grace, still I heard all of these excuses come out years after the fact. Who didn't put up with those excuses? His wife. And Fairfax shot her. I mean, again, given the situation regarding the messy divorce, which is stemming from those sexual assault allegations. According to Tyler O'Neill over at the Daily Signal, an excellent colleague, he framed this in his report today, quote, 2 women accused Fairfax of sexual assault in 2019. Vanessa Tyson accused Fairfax of forcing her to perform oral sex in the year 2004. Meredith Watson accused him of raping her in the year 2000, when both were at Duke University. Both accusers are black, as was Fairfax. Fairfax compared the accusations to being lynched. It is through Fairfax that we started hearing through the Biden administration, all of this lynching rhetoric. It originated in its kind of more modern, just very casual vernacular from Justin Fairfax defending against his sexual assault allegations. Anyway, according to Tyler, quote, Fairfax compared the accusations to lynching and denied the accusations in both cases. He had married his wife, Serena, later in 2006. So his accusations of sexual assault came before he was married. Swalwell's came after. Again, why do I point this out? Do I think that Eric Swalwell's wife is in some kind of danger? I certainly hope not. I can't speak to that because those who commit acts of sexual assault can't exactly be relied on for good moral character and judgment. But these cases happen, and they happen far too frequently. And when excuses are made for these individuals, and maybe we don't need a big, huge, DOJ investigation. Maybe we'll just say, you're out of the race, you're done. Go repent of your crimes. No, that is absolutely, unequivocally not good enough. On the other side of the truly, truly shady shenanigans, we have what is coming out of district attorneys' offices and courtrooms and courtroom professor classrooms. Specifically in Hennepin County, that's Minneapolis, and then in the courtroom classroom situation over at George Washington University. Radio crew, sorry we have to send you guys over to the commercial per FCC rules. We're going to continue over here on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, while they're away, again, thank you guys for kind of rolling through. I know there was a slight YouTube hiccup early on in the show. We're not sure what's going on there. We're going to contact them this evening, see if we need to do something a little different with the connection issues, that kind of a thing. Not necessarily the shady shenanigans that I was looking forward to dealing with this evening. These particular shady judicial shenanigans are truly a case of stories that are just not getting any better. They're not getting any better. I have not seen a more flagrant case of a district attorney gone rogue since The Dark Knight. So Mary Moriarty, she is the Hennepin County District Attorney and very proudly the first LGBTQ plus 2IA District Attorney in Minneapolis. Today announced arrest warrants for second-degree assault for 2 officers of Immigration Customs Enforcement. Here you go.
Mary Moriarty. Today, our office has charged Gregory Donnell Morgan, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE agent, with 2 counts of second-degree assault. There is now a warrant for Mr. Morgan's arrest, which allows law enforcement to arrest him anywhere in the country. Before I address the details of this case, I want to take a moment to talk about the timeline and why a charging decision was reached earlier in this case than in the shooting of Julio Sosa Solis and the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good.
So the argument that she brings forward here is that 2 months after this alleged second-degree assault, in which she claims that Gregory Donnell Morgan had driven a rented unmarked SUV along Highway 62 in Minnesota and was using the shoulder to pass slower traffic, says that the victim moved their car onto the shoulder to slow him down, which means to block him. And then when the victim moved back into the legal lane, Morgan allegedly pulled up alongside, rolled down his window, and I don't know, I guess did the Chicago drive-by routine, and she allegedly rolled down the window and pointed the gun at them. So Morgan then later told a Minnesota State police officer that he had yelled, "Police, stop," but the warrant claims that the victims had their window up so they couldn't hear him. Okay, so obviously you're hearing that this story has a lot of issues. And we haven't even gotten to the history of Mary Moriarty here, but a 2 months later arrest warrant for second-degree assault? We'll let her continue.
I know the community is following the decisions of this office very closely, and I want to be transparent on why these situations are developing at different speeds. This case followed the typical investigation and submission process for cases coming to our office.
It did not.
The Minnesota State Patrol received a 911 call from the victims, who had a gun pointed at them by the driver of a vehicle who pulled up next to them illegally on the shoulder.
Again, that is an allegation. That's an allegation. They're saying they reported or they alleged that they had a gun pointed at them.
The State Patrol was able to investigate thoroughly, identify Mr. Morgan, and conduct an interview with him at the Whipple building. After finalizing the investigative case file, the State Patrol submitted the case to our office for potential charges. Virtually none of the obstacles around evidence collection that exist for the January shootings exist in this case.
So she's making the case that the federal government didn't jump in and say, no, you can't interview, you can't have these, we're not going to bring them to the courthouse here. Bizarre stuff. We're going to get to some of the more of this information here in just a minute. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. Don't go anywhere. A lot to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. So this bizarre announcement on arrest warrants from the first LGBTQ plus 2IA, district attorney in Minneapolis, Hennepin County, Minnesota. She's issued an arrest warrant for second-degree assault for Gregory Donnell Morgan Jr. Why? Because she's claiming that he was driving around super incognito, no one had any idea, super duper hidden mode, and he was driving on the shoulder, and the victim happened to pull on the over to the shoulder to slow him down. Because, that's something, by the way, I've seen on the interstate when someone has sort of done that kind of a thing before, if there's road construction and there's some guy trying to drive on the shoulder. Very unlikely this is the exact same kind of situation. But then, again, according to the district attorney, Morgan tried to get the person in the vehicle, the victim here, to move out of the way. And they didn't move out of the way. Well, at some point, finally, they moved out of the way. They just decided to randomly. Oh, they moved out of the way. They didn't know their windows were rolled up. They just saw some unmarked mystery SUV. Could have looked like the mystery van. Who knows? And then the ICE officer pulls up to the side of the car and goes, "Hey, yo, man, you in the wrong part of town." And then flashes the gat at him. Hit him with the Glock. And then they go, "Oh, goodness heavens me. Oh, my poor heart." And they called 911. They said, "Help, help. I'm being held by bandits." And then Minnesota State Patrol. So that's what she's alleging. They're issuing arrest warrants. And there are a couple of questions here. First of all, this is 2 months later. Second of all, I'm looking for the video evidence of how this proceeded. Because so far, what the district attorney is alleging is that the person called and didn't allege this was happening, but it was happening. They were reporting it. Eyewitness news, the weather forecast right there on site. Again, a little suspicious. Now, she makes a couple of really bizarre statements in her statement to the press. One of the things that caught my ear is that she said that these the ICE officers that she's issuing second-degree assault arrest orders for can be arrested anywhere in the country. Now, by the way, on the terms of degrees of assault in the state of Minnesota, first-degree assault is when you inflict great bodily harm, like permanent disfigurement, permanent loss of function, high probability of death, attempting deadly force, that kind of a thing. Second-degree assault just involves a dangerous weapon. So if you hit somebody, but also you have a gun in your other hand, that's second-degree assault. Third-degree assault is just bodily harm. Fourth-degree assault includes physically assaulting a, quote, peace officer, firefighter, emergency medical personnel, or other protected public servants, end quote. Now, you may be wondering why I bring that up. There have been no fourth-degree assault charges that have come out of District Attorney Moriarty's office so far this calendar year. And we just so happen to have all of this footage publicly in the front of the broad public at large, in multiple angles of people whose identities have been documented assaulting those who are protected under the third-degree assault felony charge. Or excuse me, the fourth-degree assault felony charge. So bizarre for sure. At one point, as I said, she alleges that they can go and arrest the ICE officers anywhere in the country.
Mary Moriarty inside the victim's vehicle. Mr. Morgan then visibly slowed his vehicle to match the pace of the victim's vehicle, opened his window, and pointed his duty weapon directly at both victims in the other vehicle while continuing to drive illegally on the shoulder. Both the driver and the passenger.
I love the illegally on the shoulder. They're going to get him with crimes. He's, the federal law enforcement officer, who, by the way, there is no jurisdiction in this country that allows federal officers to be charged with violating basic traffic patterns. That's not a thing. The officer would just have to make the case to his superiors as to why he was driving. Now, reckless driving is something different. Driving on the shoulder, that's not constituted as reckless driving at the federal level as far as states engaging with the federal government when federal law enforcement agents are in the middle of an operation.
In the victim's vehicle felt threatened by Mr. Morgan's actions. The driver called 911 while the passenger began to video the SUV when it pulled into the lane in front of them.
There it is. When does the video start happening? Here. Now, as of yet, I haven't seen this particular footage, but if it is true, the video starts here. She's already been speaking about all of these prior events ex cathedra. Again, maybe there's traffic camera footage of this happening, but to speak through all of these things as though these are all guaranteed events, very, very suspicious. Usually this is about the time that we end up finding some video footage that proves the exact opposite. We'll find out.
On February 6th, State Patrol investigators conducted a voluntary interview with Mr. Morgan and his partner, who had been in the back seat of the rented SUV at the time of the incident. During the interview, Mr. Morgan admitted that he was driving the rented SUV, and he and his partner were headed to the Whipple building to end their shift. Additionally, he admitted that he drew his firearm after the victim's vehicle had already rejoined the normal flow of traffic, corroborating details from interviews with the victim.
Okay, so the case being made here is that they're like, yeah, they said they were there. Yeah, they said that the arguments kind of being thrown up is, yes, they were there. No one disputes that. Where does the assault part come in? Now, what's weird here is that the felony statute here, section 609, subsection 222, focuses really on the use of the dangerous weapon. It doesn't really suggest whether or not substantial bodily harm has to be a part of it. And that's what's strange here. The assault would still suggest that there was some kind of bodily harm. It just doesn't say that it needs to be substantial bodily harm. So if someone has a significant weapon and then, in hitting you, with the Louisville Slugger, I guess if we're going to constitute that as, the weapon in this case, and it doesn't cause substantial bodily harm because the person sucks at swinging the bat, then maybe that would be a second-degree assault case. If they bash your head in, yeah, that would be the first-degree assault and attempted murder. So just pointing the gun here, I mean, we're already reaching, but this is like a Mrs. Incredible contortionist stretch right here.
The State Patrol retrieved video of the incident from highway cameras, which is also consistent with the details of the interviews.
Now, that's the part that I was looking for. These highway camera videos, we haven't seen them, but if they are like other Minnesota highway patrol situations, the frames per second, it's not exactly, HD 4K, 60 frames per second kind of stuff. A lot of these videos appear to be 15 frames per second situations. She said that these particular videos corroborated the statements of the individuals in the back seat. She did not say they corroborated the statement of the victim making the police report. Again, the words in this case matter. You notice she's reading that particular point on the docket.
We have charged Mr. Morgan with 2 counts of second-degree assault, 1 count for each victim, for threatening the victims with a dangerous weapon. Second-degree assault with a gun has a presumptive sentence of 36 months in prison. Mr. Morgan's conduct was extremely dangerous.
No.
Driving while pointing a weapon out of your moving vehicle
is cool as all. I'm sorry.
At the victims who were in another moving vehicle could have led to yet another
Fast and Furious movie. Another
disastrous incident in a community that has already suffered too many.
Do you hear the word the community there? This district attorney, we're going to get into this here in a second. All of the focus completely is just on the community, not on the individual acts. Justice is supposed to be blind. You target the specific and individualized instances of crime and threats of crime. You don't say, guys, the community's like having a rough one, so I'm going to change my decisions based on the community. Only that's what she has done multiple times in her career. She finishes off by saying that these people can be arrested anywhere in the country. Like they're going to send out the Minnesota Marshals, which the only marshal I know from Minnesota is from How I Met Your Mother. But anywho, they're going to send out someone, I guess, to go arrest them anywhere. Like they're going to be turned over to the Minnesota state authorities. No. Now, one thing that I did find rather interesting came from one reporter asking if they were concerned the federal government might hold them accountable, because state officials are not allowed to arrest federal officers who are in the middle of some type of an operation like this. You can't impede the carrying out of federal law. That's not a thing that officers have the ability to do. And if there's not the idea, they pointed a gun, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Multiple cases in federal court precedent, not even needing to get up to the appeals court level. A ton of federal rulings, districts all across the country have made it clear in prior cases going back to the 60s, if a federal law enforcement officer, whether they be in the marshal's office, whether they be in the USDA and they're out investigating SNAP fraud, if they point a gun, they are answerable to their own superior. This idea that the feelings were really hurt, that's terrible, quick, get the felony. No, and I'm sorry here, but lesbian Michael Scott does not have any authority here to do so. Again, as I've told you before, ladies on the left look like one of 3 kinds of individuals. Either they look like over Botoxed Barbie Jennifer Welches. Number 2, they look like Pumbaa from The Lion King. Or number 3, they look like Michael Scott, but with grayer, spikier hair. And here we have yet another instance. Now, we're going to send the radio crew over to commercial and get into some of this particular individual's history. It's pretty crazy stuff. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. We'll catch the radio crew on the other side of it. All right. So first of all, this last question here, one of the reporters asked, are you concerned about being held accountable? And her answer just, are you concerned about federal law? She just goes, no.
Local Act, the administration hasn't made, they've said that they won't be pleased if there are charges against any federal officers involved in immigration activities.
The question is, are we concerned as to whether there would be federal blowback? They've indicated they would not be happy, something of that nature, if federal agents were to be charged. Not a concern of ours. Our role, by the way, is to hold people accountable if they violate the laws of the state of Minnesota.
LOL. No. Because she'd already made it clear that's not her concern whatsoever. Her concern is the feelings of the community. And this is where we get into the fun stuff here. She's not holding people accountable for violating the law, committing crimes in the state of Minnesota. On April 23rd of last year, She defended her decision not to criminally charge the Minnesota state employee, no one's above the law, Dylan Adams, who went around vandalizing multiple Teslas, charging stations, causing tens of thousands of dollars in damages, clear violation of the law. She didn't charge him criminally whatsoever, and she defended that. She made that a big issue.
So diversion is accountability.
Diversion. I was told that, you go after those who violate the law, but
the case was submitted to us by the police. We did not decline it. We looked at the case. What we really wanted was for the victims in that case to get restitution and for this person to be held accountable.
So we have two cases here. We have one where someone said their feelings were hurt because after they tried to block a law enforcement vehicle from proceeding, which is illegal. You are not allowed to obstruct federal law enforcement. Then they were upset later on that, he pointed a gun out, terrible. So the spookum-magookums, class 2 felony. But, actual vandalism. And again, this would be a case of domestic terrorism because this Minnesota state employee was doing so because they were angry about DOJ, the Department of Government Efficiency, in which Elon Musk, who runs Tesla, was analyzing and auditing fraudulent or waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal and state governments. So this, again, domestic terrorism is trying to achieve some kind of political change via intimidation or force. And so cases of actual domestic terrorism,
we are accomplishing both of those by requiring him to go through a diversion program.
We're going to give him some classes. Hey, keying cars and possibly encouraging arson. Oh, that's wrong. Oh, don't do that. Interesting stuff. And by the way, she did file felony charges previously against a 19-year-old woman who had reportedly keyed her own coworker's car before that. So it's not like she just doesn't think those crimes are particularly important. And she said on the record that she's really aggravated if there are any political entities that suggest people should be afraid of crime. We're going to be the Raider Crew back in one more time. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot to cover tonight. Much more. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Truly is the foolishness of those who suggest that equity hires, the equity crew, that you get into positions that somehow their inherent characteristics, whether it be the skin color, which again was the entire argued point of Justin Fairfax, who I believe was the second black man ever to be elected to a state level position in Virginia. That, the important part of it, maybe he has all these sexual assault allegations and maybe there's all these, but he's like the second black guy ever in the position. Isn't that what's most important? And here you have the DA of Hennepin County in Minneapolis, who is just choosing which cases she does and doesn't care about, has said on the record that the real problem is that people suggest that you should, be afraid of growing crime in the city of Minneapolis. Well, she's really important because she's the very first LGBTQ. She likes girls. That makes her special.
There is a concerted effort to make people afraid of crime.
Oh my gosh. You mean there are people who suggest that there are some neighborhoods you shouldn't walk in at night because there are individuals that might commit a series of very obvious crimes? Again, she let off the hook a Minnesota state official because he was participating in a predictable act of crime. So that you had people who were voluntarily selling their vehicles at a loss, that'd be considered damages, because they were terrified that their Tesla, the vehicle they bought, would be destroyed by those engaging in domestic terrorism. I mean, the cases of arson. So again, she says that, you shouldn't actually be concerned about the growth of crime. There were, even on the left side of the aisle, there were people who were rushing to put bumper stickers on their car that say, I pinky, pinky, pinky promise I'm not a Republican, don't hurt me. In Minneapolis during the George Floyd stuff, when people were saying, Black Lives Matter, please don't destroy my building and burn down the restaurant. And then, the BLM crowds did it anyway.
And I have heard over and over and over various forms of super predator.
Okay, so anyway, just the regular predator of Hennepin County. There, she wants you to know that she doesn't like this, all this negative talk. By the way, back in March of last year, she freed a violent criminal who then went on to commit a stabbing spree. That's according to the Daily Mail. A quote: Mary failed to bring any charges against repeat offender Connor Michael after he caused a fatal car crash, killing a young lady. 2 days later, Michael was charged in a separate violent stabbing incident. Well, there you go. And by the way, I mentioned this kind of in the trailer for the show. Previously, she had instituted a policy where they would change what plea you were offered based on the color of your skin. And to go back to the beginning of the show, who was the individual that stepped up and investigated this at the federal level? Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon. So in December of 2025, there was a report that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, again, under Mary Moriarty, the George Soros-backed first lesbian ever in the Hennepin County District Attorney's Office, you go girl, that she was giving different pleas based on what color your skin was. And so, Office of Civil Rights, the Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon said, how about no, not going to be a thing.
Nope.
And so after investigating for 2 months, her office got that Hennepin County office to change its policies. And they changed the policies because what they were doing was highly, highly illegal. These kind of shenanigans are not just these one-off incidents. They happen all the time. And as we get through and into the campaign season and people kind of start to forget some of these things, I mean, you would at least think that some of the left-wing apparatus in the country that's pushing all of this important equity nonsense would tell people to stop making some really, really dumb decisions. Nope. One of the most bizarre articles I think that I've seen, this is from the Washington Free Beacon's Jessica Costacue. The George Washington University, the same one, who is currently under in the middle of an anti-Semitism lawsuit in which they allowed, Jewish students to be threatened and intimidated, where they might have also limited the amount of white students, Jewish students who could apply. A lot of little things wrapped up into this lawsuit again regarding anti-Semitism in George Washington University. Well, the federal judge who is overseeing this lawsuit, Judge Lauren Ali Khan, George Washington University has just hired to teach a course on, I'm not joking, ethics and discretionary judgment. Holy sweet baby Moses floating in a basket down the mile. I cannot. You guys, you can't write this. You couldn't put this in a movie. In the middle of a lawsuit, that Biden-appointed judge, there it is, Lauren Ali Khan, was overseeing a lawsuit against George Washington University. That university hired her to teach a course on ethics and discretionary judgment. Again, this is according to Washington Free Beacon's Jessica Costacue. Truly, truly bizarre. Now, her investigation on this, topics uncovered in the class include, quote, protocol professionalism and judicial decision-making, an attorney's ethical duties and discretionary judgment, and the attorney's role in creating a legal system that should provide equal access and eliminate bias, discrimination, and racism in the law. LOL. This is where you would recuse yourself. You'd say, look, conflict of interest, you need to go to another federal judge. I'm teaching a class at the university now. No, thank you. That would be what some would consider the obvious thing to do here. No shame whatsoever. Do it out in the open, and then say it's good when it happens. And then if any crazy, horrible, violent crime happens as a result, you're called racist or homophobic or sexist or whatever for noticing. This is why when Justice Clarence Thomas of the Supreme Court said this today, it was probably one of the most aptly timed statements in modern American history. This is Justice Clarence Thomas today.
I think if we don't stand up and take ownership of our country and take responsibility for it, we are slowly letting others control how we think and what we think.
The reason that there are those in these positions where you can say they are controlling how we think, what we think, it's not just a public school issue. People are Pavlovian, meaning monkey see, monkey do, meaning what you witness and observe in front of you will govern your actions based on the perceived consequences. This is one of the oldest and probably of the soft sciences, one of the most corely reliable rules in human pattern psychology and anthropology. Radio crew, sorry, we have to send you guys out. We have some news over on the live stream tonight. We are not done with things. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Hopefully we'll see y'all over there. Y'all take care. All right, continuing over on the live stream side. When you have district attorneys, when you have congressmen and women who encourage crime to occur, who will just simply quit and get out of some kind of a very serious allegation because, well, they resigned, the ethics committee can do nothing, and, well, we can't have the DOJ investigate them, that would be really political. And if you have, in the case of, again, Moriarty up in Minneapolis, just deciding willy-nilly what she decides and does and doesn't want to do, including trying to influence the federal government carrying out federal law enforcement actions here, then people will start to expect this as the norm, which means that people will act accordingly. And only bad can come out of that. So Clarence Thomas is exactly on the nose here.
I think the beauty of going to school is that you learn how to think for yourself. You develop the discipline to think things through. If you think it's losing confidence, then you get up and you participate. You don't sit on the sidelines. You think that the state is being run and inconsistent with how you feel, then you get up and you participate. You prepare yourself. If you think that the medical profession is not right, well, you become a doctor or be a medical person, and you deal with that.
That is the most important advice. The most important advice to give the people of the United States right here, right now. There is a concerted effort on the right side of the aisle that wants you to believe you can do nothing. It's already all bought, sold, and paid for. There's nothing. It's all over. We're all doomed. Ladies like Moriarty are going to run things, or you're going to have congressmen that do whatever you want. You just might as well just like suck it up and put your head down, and it'll all be over. And whatever. There is a concerted effort to make you believe that, or to make you believe that the real reason all this is happening is because Netanyahu and the Jews are doing something. That kind of retarded nonsense. There is a concerted effort to get you to disengage. And the left is perfectly fine watching it happen. Because if Americans disengage, then they win. They win. Low propensity, low turnout elections almost always heavily favor those who are going out and doing the kinds of ballot harvesting the Democrats are proud to announce that they do. What Clarence Thomas is making the case for is that you cannot afford, your family and your children cannot afford for you to sit back and just go, well, it's probably already screwed. It's over anyway. No, absolutely not. We've seen several times in the last couple of years, incidents and occasions in which those who act directly and immediately, without any kind of reservation and move to do so, sometimes sacrificially, can change things for the better. And it is wholly frustrating. I understand. And I rarely do this, but there was a comment from a YouTube member, Don B, been a member for a while here, who says, crime doesn't pay unless you're a Somali or a politician. And I hear, I get the snide, I get the snide take there. I disagree though. I do. I disagree. Crime pays based on the system in which one can get away with those who have power over them to look the other way. By which I mean this: crime pays if you are in the jurisdictions of those who are built to foster crime. We often talk about all of the politicians who do get away with things. There are a lot of states in this country, many of them red states, one or two of them sometimes kind of purple states, who equally charge those, including those in power, in office, with crimes, and will remove them from office and then will send them to jail. We do see this. And there are a series of federal investigations that actually do turn out in a manner that benefits the American people and justice is served. It is not the rule. It is something that must be fought for every time, because if it is worth it, it is also worth fighting for. If it's worth doing right. And so I understand kind of the case there, but the idea of there being groups that Americans just kind of come to assume are going to get away with it, so kind of why bother? And I'm not saying that's what Don was suggesting at all, not even a little bit. It's something that we've all kind of suggested in one way or another. But can Americans actually get together and flip states like Minnesota? Absolutely. Absolutely. And why do I say this? Largely because of individuals like Scott Presler. So I'm going to do something else that's a little bit unusual here. We're going to come back and talk about some of the international updates regarding the Operation Epic Fury, Operation Economic Fury, and the ceasefire with Israel and Lebanon, as well as Cuba, in a couple of minutes here. First, we're going to chat with Scott Presler, and I want to talk just for a couple of minutes with the expert, the key expert in this country when it comes to actually getting average Americans to get out and do something. This is the man who he's registered hundreds of thousands of Republicans at this point. He has flipped states like Pennsylvania into bigger Republican turnouts than Democrat turnouts at a time when I'm told this can't happen in many of these places. So we're going to pivot over to that. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these international updates. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere. A ton to cover this evening. Sometimes you have the big in-studio interviews. Sometimes you've got stuff from behind the desk where everything's all prepared. You can't really get Scott Presler like that because this man is always on the road. He doesn't sleep. This man is sponsored by insomnia. I'm not joking. This guy's got all of the stuff to do. And when I have a file cabinet worth of stuff to talk about, the persistence himself is the one that we go to. Scott, thanks for giving us a couple seconds.
Hey, thank you. Just leaving Franklin for Indianapolis, and I'm proud to be reporting live from the Hoosier State.
So a lot of stuff to do in Indiana, a lot of stuff to do all over the country. Again, you're tracking, obviously, voter registration in like 6 different states and commonwealths. You're trying to get a lot of voters energized about basically everything from A to Y. Here, while you're in the heartland, what are a couple of things that you're driving forward that you think are going to make the biggest impact, at least to Hoosier voters and kind of the Midwestern voter at large?
Well, I'm here, and thank you very much for having me on your program, to hold accountable our state Senate, and notably Republican state senators. You know, to the outsider, people like me, they look at Indiana and they think, okay, Republican governor, Republican state house, Republican state Senate. You know, this is a state like Florida or Tennessee or South Carolina that you expect a Republican majority to legislate Republican victories. And I think we're finding that
one would think
the state Senate isn't as conservative as a lot of people think. And so I'm here to hold to account these state senators that aren't working towards abolishing property taxes, that aren't working towards only giving CDLs and driver's licenses to legal, lawful, working class American citizens, not illegal aliens. And issues like making sure that men are not in women's private places and that women can feel secure in those private places here in the Hoosier State. And I'm asking people to make a plan and mark their calendars for May 5th. And I hope that May 5th, the Republican primary in Indiana, will be a day of reckoning, and that people are using their primary power to vote for their conservative choices.
This is something that is kind of bewildering to me. Those that have watched the show for a long time, I'm already going to go ahead and throw this interview completely off the rails and off script here. Something that irks me. I go around talking to individuals across the country and asking, well, how do we actually move forward with getting kind of the old establishment folks who don't seem to care, who make a lot of backroom deals, who seem very disinterested in the concerns and the issues from those who they are representing. When I'm in those kind of conversations, they ask, how do you do it? This is something that I believe you've got kind of an expertise in, to increase the turnout, not just in the general election, but in the primary election in Pennsylvania by hundreds of thousands. When I'm seeing your work in Georgia, when I'm seeing it on the East Coast, the West Coast, what is it that we actually do to get some of these voters out to the primary? Because again, that's when you make the decision before, the big November either or.
Well, you show up and you knock on doors and you go to farmers markets and you go to gun shops and you go to gun shows and you bring your message to the people. You can't expect the people to come to you, right? That's why turnout is so low. And so I can tell you, I've been in Indiana for 24 hours. And even during that time, I've been door knocking myself as a Pennsylvanian to help elect conservative leadership here in Indiana. And Vincennes, we were knocking on doors and I was learning from the voters about the high property taxes. And I was asking for their vote for Jeff Ellington for state senate. And so my goal is to help lead by example, to show by doing, and to explain that if the Republican Party wants to earn votes and wants to increase voter turnout, you bring your message to the doors, to the people, and shaking one hand at a time. That is how we're going to increase turnout.
You do realize this is a little bit unusual, right? To actually, when you get to this stage where you have, the millions of followers and you have kind of the national recognition, the credibility, you're doing all of these various media interviews, you're expected to have a staff that is kind of doing all of this stuff for you. You may release a social media campaign and do some influencer work and just talk about it. But you, like you said this morning, since you've been in the state for a whopping 24 hours, you're already out there doing the on-the-ground conversation. What do you think? And I'm not looking for kind of a prepackaged answer here. What are you still learning from going door to door? Because this is something that sounds really nice on camera, right? It's not like saying I'm going door to door is going to get you any dirty looks. What are you still getting that's valuable, whether you're talking to the establishment person who maybe doesn't see the value of going door to door anymore, or perhaps the young person too focused on the staying on their phone all the time, social media style? What's the value of doing what it is that you're doing? What are you still learning?
Well, here I am, an outsider, and I can already tell you that the people in Vincennes, their property taxes are going up. How do I know that? How did I ascertain that? And not from listening to Hoosiers that I'm doing these events across the state with. It's because I listen. It's because I have a willingness to learn. It's because I ask them these questions. How can we make life better? What is going on? How do you feel about our president? How do you feel about the job the president is doing? So one of the best ways to learn is by shutting your trap, opening your ears, and actually having a desire to hear from the very constituents that you want to earn their vote. That's what populism is, right? You listen to people, you craft a policy that they want, and then you deliver on the very people that elected you into office. That's what I'm here to deliver, populism.
I'll take a bit of a risk here then and ask you kind of a question that I feel as though I've been too in the loop to get kind of the average American's take on. The Save America Act has started to move out of kind of the national discourse. The media went through, they covered it. There was a whole shutdown fight over it. We made fun of Schumer 37 times in a row for how much of an idiot he is on the subject of basic voter ID and requirements. Now the national media, and I have to say, unfortunately, including yours truly, I'm not covering it as much anymore. Do you still hear, again, doing all this door knocking, going door to door with my fellow statesmen? Are they still focused on this? What are they saying? What are you hearing regarding the Save America Act, if anything?
I can tell you, I asked voters about it, and I said to one voter, do you know what the Save America Act is? She wasn't aware, but I broke it down for her. Do you agree that only citizens should vote? She said, yes. I said, do you agree that we should have voter ID to vote? She said, yes. I said, then you support the Save America Act. So this is a constant education campaign. And on the program that I just went on, the podcast, I made a direct ask. Call your House members. Thank them for supporting the Save America Act. Ask them to be a no vote to any legislation, including FISA, until the Save America Act is passed. To the Senate, asking to not only be a co-sponsor to the Save America Act, but to bring it to the floor for debate and force Democrats that are opposed to what 84% of Americans want to speak on behalf why they are against it, this common sense country-saving legislation. And I ask people, that number for the Senate is 202-224-3121. Call Young, call Banks, call your members of Congress, but this is the single most important piece of legislation, barring anything else that the American people want, and you cannot let this issue go. We are finding illegal aliens on the voter rolls in Pennsylvania. There are illegal aliens on the voter rolls in Michigan, Arizona. We literally have documented proof, and any fraudulent or illegal vote steals a lawful vote from an American citizen. And so and it dilutes those votes, those legal lawful votes. And so we cannot have any confidence in our elections until we secure them. And even with you, I'm going to challenge you very respectfully on this program that you are gifting me with time right now, that you still include as much as you can talking about the Save America Act, because we simply are not going to let this issue go.
I think it's an issue that's worth covering. Again, this kind of complete overhaul of national security should be a common sense issue, because it's a national security issue. I mean, it's a core issue of citizenship. Scott Presler, again, the persistence man. Head over to earlyvoteaction.com. That's his site. This man never sleeps, never stops, and it's far more likely before you see him on screen again, you might see him outside your door. Scott, thank you for giving us a couple of minutes.
Thank you. And I am proud to be partnering with Turning Point Action, doing events across the state, St. John, Franklin, West Lafayette, Lake County. And I ask people, allow your day of reckoning, the day that you hold to account members of a Republican state Senate, to make sure that we have true conservatives. You mark your calendars and you vote by May 5th. And if you can't vote May 5th, vote early. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So again, I think that Scott Presler is just one of the best, because he is the on the ground guy. The other crew that is going to do a lot of the bringing the day of reckoning against a lot of judges, they're going to come from the legal groups that don't simply bend over and call it a day whenever, times get tough. And this would be all about, and I want to make this clear, all about the folks over at groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, which again, I'm thrilled they're sponsoring the show, not only because of the huge legal victory that I kind of had a hand in this week, but also because they are the group that is consistently delivering victory after victory after victory, like toppling Roe v. Wade, securing a landmark free speech win at the Supreme Court on behalf of the graphic designer Lori Smith. They're a Christian legal ministry dedicated to advancing the stuff we like: free speech, religious freedom, the sanctity of life, parental rights, God's design for marriage and the family. They're fighting some of the culture's most pressing issues. The kind of stuff that the district attorney from Hennepin County is really, really against. From the protection of women's sports to stopping mail-order abortion drugs. ADF, however, they rely on the generous support of people like you and like me to protect freedom in the courtroom and the culture. Every dollar that you give to ADF will be matched. That means you give $25, they match it, it becomes $50. $50 becomes $100 only while their matching funds last. Go to joinadf.com, joinadf.com/Tony, or text Tony to 83848 to have your gift to ADF matched. That's joinadf.com/Tony, or text Tony to 83848 to double your impact for freedom. So again, there's a lot of information that we've been looking into throughout the show. Kind of in the background, our reporters doing their very suave and specific investigative work, all the way over to the Middle East and the Iranian situation. Now, there are a couple of new updates that we didn't have right when the show began. That there are now multiple reports. Reuters, I believe, is the first, and they're claiming the exclusive here, that the United States has begun delaying weapons deliveries to some European countries due to the Iranian Operation Epic Fury. And not just that, well, the United States doesn't have things to send. No. The reason the United States is delaying a lot of the deployments to Baltic and Scandinavian countries is because NATO does absolutely bleeping nothing. And they've done nothing. And now it's really funny. Already, European officials have told Reuters that these delays really undermine their defense readiness. Well, you know what? If you want to be so ready, you manufacture your own defenses. I'm sorry, but Scandinavian countries who run their mouth 90% of the time, and the other 10% of the time, they want to come up and ask for, please, sir, can I have some more? How about no, Oliver Twiston Jorgensen? Go back to the table. Make your own weapons if Russia's so scary to you. Why, if we ask you for, again, some intelligence sharing, maybe a base to fly from, perhaps we ask you to come guard Cyprus yourself, you lousy limeys, then maybe you come and do it. And I realize that the HMS Dragonfire, Dragonhide, Dragon whatever, is like the rest of the British Navy right now, which is a mockery. And the French aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, is basically made out of recycled Pepsi cans. But anyway, so the Europeans are crying about that, and boo-hoo. So aside from that little bit of news, over on the flip side of things here at home, regarding Cuba, and again, regarding the Iranian stuff, hang on with me just for a second. While the U.S. is dealing with Operation Epic Fury and Operation Economic Fury, of course, with the Department of War, Epic Fury, and Operation Economic Fury with the Department of Treasury, seizing Iranian assets instead of the Obama years where we, give them pallets of cash. That kind of stuff. In the meantime, in our hemisphere, how is the Cuban regime doing? After all, they had their little Code Pink socialist super duper group. Speaking of my colleague Tyler O'Neill, he has an excellent piece on Code Pink over at the Daily Signal. You should go read it. It's a good one. I know because I was asked about it before I read it today on the air with Vic Borcelli on News Talk STL, and I had to read it extremely quickly while I was on the phone with him because, the work never ends. So you should be more prepared than I was. But after the little Freedom to Cuba flotilla happened, where they had some special concerts and Hassan Piker dressed like Fidel Castro while his girlfriend was at home seeing other dudes. That particular thing, in which the Socialist Armada gave a couple of solar panels, not to hospitals that needed it, but, to the Cuban regime. Well, how are things going over there right now? They're doing readiness drills. Readiness drills, that's right, because it turns out Russia's not coming to the rescue. China's not coming to the rescue. And Venezuela is really not coming to the rescue. So if Cuba's going to do some national defense, they're going to have to do it their own dang selves. And boy, have they. I'm glad that you guys are watching on the live stream. This is a clip I'm sharing with just you. I can't imagine trying to share this and explain what's happening to the radio side. So if you're on the podcasting crew, I'm not even going to try to explain this. You're going to have to go to youtube.com/Daily Signal and watch it. There are anti-aircraft drills that are being conducted. So first of all, this is the Cuban military, anti-aircraft drills. So you'll notice right off the bat, you have the sort of trailer cart looking thing with some camouflage netting that is really worse for wear. And don't get me wrong, I understand ghillie camouflage. It's not supposed to look that bad. I mean, this just looks like one of the Charmin bears found your camo. So anyway, they have two guys in their Cuban dress. They don't match. That's the sign of a successful regime when the uniforms don't match. And they are pointing rifles at the sky, I think, because the second guy appears to be holding an imaginary rifle. So one guy is holding either some kind of an AK or an M4 platform automatic rifle. The second dude appears to be holding a flag twirler's baton. So, I've heard of majors, but never drum majors. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I'll let you see, let you observe in full here. We'll actually fit this to the screen. Watch what happens. So now you have four guys in the squad. One appears to be carrying an M2 carbine. Holy, right after World War II, Batman. And the others are shooting into the sky. And then you see the anti-aircraft gun. By the way, that thing is freaking ancient. Ancient. That thing could not accurately plot out and shoot down the Cherokee that I enjoy flying. Not even that. Couldn't even shoot the single engine Cessna. Nay, not even the paper airplanes of an elementary school field day could this thing shoot down. But you'll notice, it's kind of spooking something. Uh-oh. Oh, wait a minute. That anti-aircraft gun is pulled by an ox. That's right. The Cuban regime's military is doing so well, ladies and gentlemen, that they have ox-powered anti-air, who is not trained, by the way, in any way, shape, or form. Because sometimes we can train animals, horses especially, you could train to ignore certain levels of gunfire or spooky, scary noises, or you could even, again, depending on how you raised horses in the very, very, very early days of World War I, before machine guns made the cavalry, at least the horse-drawn cavalry, extinct. They even trained some young foals to resist a little bit of the barbed wire. Very early failed Austro-Hungarian experiment, that one. But, alas, this ox has not been trained for a tham ding. It's very spooked. And it's like, oh. And the guy with the rope afterwards. So the Cuban military is doing real well. Whenever you have the oxen, we have the Oregon Trail. Now we've got the Oregon anti-aircraft. That third guy in the squad is trying not to die from dysentery. Incredible stuff. Truly incredible. All right. Some of the foreign news. For example, another war powers resolution, the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. We're going to get to some of that stuff tomorrow, and for two reasons. First of all, we don't have enough time tonight to give it justice. Number two, I'm expecting some more news to make a couple of these things obsolete. Mainly that the president has said, in essence, they're going to give us the nuclear dust. They've said it in our negotiations that there's a lot of uranium. I call it nuclear dust. You need more than pledge to clean up nuclear dust. They said they're going to give it to us. We'll have to see how that goes. I have a hunch that we're going to see the IRGC, who absolutely did not agree to that.
Nope. It
was likely President Pez Dispenser, President Pezekistan, President Pezekian, whatever. President Pico de Gallo, he is not. He may agree to that, but the IRGC is not going to let him agree to that. So we'll cover some more of that stuff tomorrow. You have to come back, and also a little Operation Economic Fury. You've heard of tax returns. Now we're doing foreign tax returns. By that, I mean foreign taxes are returning to the United States. So we'll cover some of that tomorrow. I do want to share with you a couple of things. So first and foremost, on the, oh dear sweet heavens, how stupid can you be? It's not just the judicial decisions that are getting this wild. The Democrat media, the Democrat podcast crew, which I am told, while our show continues to grow and do better and better, their shows, which are declining a little bit in popularity, but I'm told are doing very well. They now have people like Joy Reid out there telling you that what the really worst, most awful, terrible thing that might happen? People paying lower taxes. That's her message to America. Imagine a world in which you don't pay any taxes. Here's how she describes it.
Is that if you go back before the 20th century, there were no income taxes, there were no regulations on business. You could earn as much money as you want, leave 100% of it to your children with no taxes. Right. That's the world they want back.
Oh no! You could leave your money to your children? Those sick, twisted, evil, horrible individual. Oh, the pain, the horror. Say it ain't so, Joy Reid. They didn't pay as much, they didn't have an income tax? I mean, I could make money and then I would keep the money? Scandalous.
Get it back, they need society to change. They need people to be less modern. They need people to want fewer things.
Excellent. So again, as we've covered earlier this week, while Zoran Mamdani and Kathy Hochul and Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker and Ro Khanna are running around doing the give me money, give me your money. Joy Reid saying, you don't even want to have money. Give me your money instead. Excellent. Best of luck to you. Again, the economy is the number one driver of the midterms. The economy is what drives the midterms, period. Has been that way for at least 60 years. So if the Trump administration, which, by the way, tax day is being a pretty decent success, then you've got people like, Lamont McClure Jr. He's a Pennsylvania Democrat who's running for Congress. If these are the clips that are going to surround you, you're going to get out here and make these arguments instead. No, well.
So one of the very first things I did when I became county executive was add gender ID, gender expression to the protections in our personnel policy manual because they were not there previously. So I actually made, as part of our governing regulations in Northampton County, protections for our employees should they be transgender. So here you have another example of things I've done that signal what I would do as a member of Congress.
Yes, that's what I want. I want a chubby middle-aged white dude with like the saggy Pritzker chin. That's what I need. I need him telling me the very first thing that I got into office and I started doing was start going, man, how can I let everyone know that my genitals are weird? Yes, excellent. There's a reason the midterms are supposed to be some kind of referendum on the president, because the president makes a series of economic promises. And a lot of other, little minor cultures become a bigger part of each election. And so when the president gets out there and makes these promises, there's going to be rivers of gold flowing, milk and honey. You're going to think it's the promised land. The VeggieTales are going to sing a song about it. You see that then Democrats traditionally, especially the moderate kind of corporatist Democrats who would claim to kind of be capitalist, but like, no, not really. They would say, hey, the stock market was not good. In fact, remember Joe Biden's economy and how good it was? And they would take credit for like the first couple months of the recent part of the administration. They'd say, well, really, this isn't Trump's economy, it's Obama's economy. And it's not Bush's economy, it's Bill Clinton's economy. That kind of a thing. Well, guys, to win a midterm, you not only do you have to say, you get Jasmine Crockett there, hey, these gas prices, these are problematic. I don't even like this. Governor Hot Wheels, he don't even know what he's doing. When you have Jasmine Crockett getting out there doing that stuff, what you're supposed to do is say, here's what I would do to lower gas prices. Here's what I would do to lower grocery costs. Here's what I would do to lower energy and economy costs. But Democrats have not run on that. They have not run on that at all. For over a decade. They haven't produced anything. Again, this is Ezra Klein's greatest issue. Now, the funny thing is Ezra Klein, the same guy who's Mr. Abundance, and said that, Democrats need to like really embrace nuclear power and like having a lot of power, then they can do the social kind of agenda. Well, now he's going all in on endorsing Hassan Piker, the guy who says, I love Hamas and the United States needs to die a flaming, burning death. Hassan Piker was just doing this thing at Yale. This is the left's new like version of Ben Shapiro, and it's literally a guy who just dresses up as Chairman Mao.
Empires never die quietly, and we must end the American empire regardless. But we must manage.
I'm sorry, that little thumping you hear is there's this really gay tradition at Yale where when they're in a room and they really like what the person is saying. So you know how like really lame, smelly hippies at like the early crappier coffee bars would do their beat poetry? Yeah, man, it's like really great, man. Like that kind of a thing instead of clapping. Well, at Yale, they don't know how to snap their fingers because I guess that daddy's and mommy's money is enough to bribe the SAT crew, but it's not enough to teach you how to snap. So instead, they like thump their legs. Like, if you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. But they do a little of that. And then they also kind of awkwardly pound the bottom of their fist on the table. Great way of getting rid of some kind of cysts. But this is how they cheer. So sorry, that little thing. The American empire needs to fall, says, Hassan here.
The retreat of a superpower from the world stage. This is a challenge for our time. Actually, this is the challenge for our time.
And you have the retarded leg humping. All right. So in this particular instance, he also goes on to say the greatest tragedy was the fall of the Soviet Union. I'm not joking. So this is the guy, even the more abundant Democrats, the ones that would say, well, I'm actually about moderate, like economy stuff. Yeah, even they, like Ezra Klein, are abandoning all of what could be their only midterm strategy. The only thing that could get people out to vote, the independents, the labor union style Democrats that voted for Trump, but now might be convinced to kind of go back and vote for Democrats in the midterm. We actually have to tell them, here's how I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z. Now, what's funny is for the unions, for a long time, they'd go, we're going to throw a lot of tariffs out there. And then it turned out that long-term tariffs sucked. As a negotiation tactic, they were kind of useful. But like long-term, like Madagascar's giving us too many bananas. That didn't work. And then Peter Navarro and Howard Lutnick were sent to the corner while Scott Bessent came out and used numbers. So like that argument, Democrats aren't using that argument now because Trump kind of took it. Trump is governing basically at will from both the Bill Clinton economic left, the kind of stuff that didn't really work in the 90s, but we decided to repackage it. And then also some of the right-wing free trade stuff when it works. Kind of both. And what's funny is that left the Democrats with nothing other than, we're going to give you free healthcare. We're going to get out there. We're going to take all the billionaires. We're going to roast them alive. And in New York, you have Zoran Mamdani. We're going to tax all of the second homes, and I'm going to dox anyone making over $60,000 a year. That's his plan. And that's what you're going to advertise to people? And then you have this, Democrats running for Congress. Well, I'm really for as wild in the bedroom as you can be. I mean, like Eric Swalwell. Like Justin Fairfax, that's what you're going to run on? All of the super duper, alley-ooper pro LGBTQ plus 2IA, or as the Canadian lady said, M&M 265 hashtag symbol, the extra junk they put on that label for the Canadians. You think that's what's going to get people out to vote? Midterms, to pull a Charles Barkleyism here, it's about who has more points. It's about who's able to get enough people out to vote. So the right has people like Scott Presler. Now, there was a super chat that came in during the show, a very kind $10 super chat. No matter how many times I tell you guys, you do not need to do this. Very kind from Richard Waring, $5 super chat. Very, very kind of you. Said, is Trump going to make the last 3 months before the midterms look like a presidential election with rallies and get out the vote events?
Nope.
I don't see it at this point. I don't. That is what I have been calling for and asking for and kind of begging for a long, long, long time. For a long time. I said, you know what Republicans need? They need to start treating the midterms like presidential elections because Republicans have a skill Democrats don't have. They do. One of the secret skills, if Democrats have this skill where they can take an issue and have everyone vote the same way on it and kind of like ideologically morph into one thing to get it through, Republicans also have a superpower. Republicans kind of superpower in the political side. They can take issues that average Americans really wouldn't care about and they can make them care about it. That's true. And by the way, Republicans often end up being right in the issues that they tell Americans to be concerned about. They make a pitch to their constituents. A Democrat will make a pitch to their constituents and the constituents won't listen, and then they'll protest outside of Schumer's office. But Republican, your congressman, who you're tired of, can come back and make a pitch to you, and like 3 out of the 5 things that he says, you're like, yeah, all right, yeah, that sounds pretty important. And it becomes a major issue in the country. That is a superpower Republicans have. What I have said for years, the Republicans need to hold a convention during midterm years. It is so obvious to me, it hurts. The RNC is always a good time for Republicans. For the Democrats, it's always a struggle session. It's essentially a lesbian divorce hearing. Every DNC is a lesbian divorce hearing. And with Mary Moriarty, literally. But in the Republican side, it's kind of like a festival. It's really cool. I went to both in 24. In 24, it was awkward and weird and a mess. The Republican, even amid all the security after the attempted assassination on President Trump's life, the RNC in 24 was freaking awesome. It was amazing. It was incredible. And the reason it was incredible is because it's a rejuvenating time to get around other like-minded people. It's also one of the reasons the right is often more found in church. Getting around each other. It's not a chance for performance. It's a chance for encouragement and kind of a shared vision and an idea you are not alone in the wilderness. You are not. It's not all over. There's places to go. There are things to do. There's the reason that the energy in some of the red states is because of the contested elections. Because Florida, they have to fight for it. Then you actually have Republicans who get together and fight. You get around a bunch of other Republicans and it's like, wow, this is kind of freaking awesome. I love it. this is something that the RNC really should do. It's something that Trump should do. But the RNC's probably not going to do it. Whatley's running for the Senate. Lara Trump's doing other stuff. We didn't keep it together. I said here on the show, on the air, to you guys, and I'm not saying this is like, well, they should have listened to me. I'm saying this is a matter of record. You know, I'm a receipts guy. When I say I make a prediction, I like to point back to a time that I said that. This is what they need. You got to get Republicans together and amp it up and say, here's what we're going to do. And we're going to get out there and we're going to run this like a presidential election. We're going to make your congressman look appealing. There's really a lot of heavy carrying for some of them. Because then you have debates at the RNC. You kind of work things out. You get Congress people on a stage with a lot of angry delegations from other states. Let me see how the New York Republican Party responds to Mike Lawler talking about the Dignity Act or Haitian temporary protected status stuff. Because if New York Republicans are cheering and 49 other Republican delegations are booing, it's going to shake things up a little bit in the election. That's what's needed. Is it going to happen? Do I think it's going to happen? No. I think we're going to be too busy. And it's going to be another. Now, could I be wrong? I hope and pray I am. I do. Again, going to have to be a question as we get a little bit closer to the election. But just for me, just from here, yours truly, Tony Kinnett, that is, I really don't think. Now, there are a couple of other questions. Like there's Hoosier Ed asking about how many Indiana rhinos will be primaried. I will take some of these questions. Also, like other questions on broadcasts and media. We'll answer some of these tomorrow. One question that I'm not trying to do a big mail time segment tonight. I do want to save some of that stuff for tomorrow because some of these actually require me to go sit down and look up some of this stuff. You guys are getting better at asking more difficult questions. And I just don't like answering you kind of flying off the handle. I do like to go look up some of these. From Homie in Montana asks, can they, as in I'm guessing the state police in Minnesota, legally arrest a federal agent for an accusation? I would need to see the Minnesota state statutes, but if the federal government can simply provide evidence that the officer was acting in accordance to the operation in play, no, they can't. And there are some other, there's a case out of Nevada, and then there's a case out of Florida in the early aughts, both of them during the Bush administration, actually, in which sort of a situation like this arose, and there were two kind of different rulings, but they were different. One was duty related, one wasn't. Let me look a little of that up for you, and I might be able to answer kind of over on the Discord if it comes to me quicker here after the show. Otherwise, I'll try to come back to this tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're also going to cover some of the Iran and the Israel and the Lebanon stuff. The tide is absolutely turning in the Trump administration's favor in kind of the public perception as well. And the reason I say that is a lot of the media is starting to not cover it. We're going to cover some of that and some other news that we're dying to get into tomorrow. However, as it is 8:39 p.m., I'll say this kind of as a final closer. I had announced yesterday that we have some really, really, really cool, exciting stuff going on regarding the show and it being the end of season 1. Well, one of the providers that we work with, and they're really excellent people, they want another week just to put the kind of polish on over at the Daily Signal side. So here on the Tony Kinnett side, we're like ready to go with season 2. But because we're such great team players with our folks over at the Daily Signal, it's going to be another week. 22nd is when we're going to launch season 2. So you get a bonus week of season 1, So just to clarify, because one person said, was the new update that just you wore a t-shirt instead of a collared shirt? No, that's not it. Oh my goodness. You guys really, some of your comments, they do have me cracking up during the show. Really appreciate you guys. Again, link to the Discord in the description. Also, one more time, as far as the great Scott Presler is concerned, would highly encourage you go check out earlyvoteaction.com, and then of course adflegal.com, or join ADF, I should say, given the very, very kind sponsorship. joinadf.com/Tony. That's kind of your little extra tidbits there at the end. Now, that all said, it's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. We'll see you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. Take care.